I would like to welcome back Dr. Neil Jacobs, who in his spare time, apart from testifying before our subcommittee, serves as NOAA's acting administrator. Thank you for coming back for your second time. As acting administrator, Dr. Jacobs oversees the agency's $5.4 billion budget, which includes NOAA's sea, air, land, and space observing platforms and the critical environmental data they provide. He also covers the wet side of NOAA and all of its work in fisheries and coastal management. Now the administration has requested $4.46 billion for NOAA for fiscal year 2020. The agency's top three priorities include improving extreme weather prediction through the implementation of the Weather Act, expanding the blue economy, and further investments in space innovation. These are good steps, but remain vastly overshadowed by the devastating cuts President Trump has in store for NOAA. The request represents an 18% decrease, or nearly a $1 billion cut from the 2019 enacted level. In terms of job cuts, this amounts to a reduction of 547 civilian positions within the agency, which is quite devastating. The massive cuts or outright elimination of vital environmental research remains wildly unrealistic and unworkable, just as they have for the past 2 fiscal years. This proposal severely cuts funding for ocean exploration and observations, species recovery programs, the Tsunami warning program, fisheries management programs, grants to our academic and nonprofit research institutions that conduct research to further NOAA's goals and mission, just to name a few. It once again proposes a complete elimination of funding for NOAA grant and education program it deems as lower priority, including Sea Grant, Coastal Zone Management Grants, Pacific Coastal Climate Research, the Coastal Salmon Recovery Fund. These remain non-starters with the subcommittee, we must tell you now. I would like to remind the administration that investment in critical research at our universities protecting coastal habitats, where 1/2 of the U.S. population resides, and the livelihoods of fishermen are not low priority, not to this subcommittee. These grant programs employ thousands of scientists across the country and territories, protect local economies, and give us the tools to safeguard our communities against sea level rise and climate change. The investments we make today will prepare us for the challenges we face tomorrow. As our February hearing on NOAA climate research made very clear, we are starting to experience those challenges now. Therefore, I do not believe this budget, as presented to us today, allows NOAA to live up to its core mission as the administration would have us believe. Dr. Jacobs, it is good to see you. Thank you for joining us to discuss NOAA's priorities and outlook for fiscal year 2020. This time I recognize my friend, the ranking member, Ms. Sato.
Thank you for yielding, Mr. Chairman, and look forward to having another productive day of hearings. I think we've got a pretty full day today, so good to have Dr. Jacobs here. And welcome back to the subcommittee, and we appreciate you taking time to join us to discuss the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, better known as NOAA, FY 2020 budget. Of course, as we see, the FY 2020 budget request is $4.5 billion. Of course, reduction $968 million from FY 19 enacted level. I understand that formulating the FY 2020 budget, you're required to make some tough choices, and you got to make some put some programs above others. And while I have concerns that some potential programs impact and some of the things that would be impacted by this request, especially when it comes to key weather research programs, I am pleased to see that that your budget continues to, and NOAA continues to focus on identifying agency efficiencies, maximizing economic contributions to our coastal and marine resources, and also reducing the impact of extreme weather. Utilizing the information that we gather from the hearing today, this subcommittee will work hard over the coming months to carefully review the budget proposal to provide NOAA the resources that it needs for FY 2020 to effectively carry out its mission. So, Dr. Jacobs, again, we look forward to your testimony and continue to work together to better understand and predict the changes in our world's weather system and the bodies of water, and share that information to the public and to conserve our coastal and marine resources. So with that, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Jacobs, you're recognized for 5 minutes. Try to keep it to 5, but please understand that your whole statement will be inserted in the record.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. The President's FY20 budget request for NOAA is $111 million above the FY19 request and emphasizes core programs while making targeted investments which we believe will produce a substantial return for the American taxpayer. Accelerating advancements in the global modeling program is a top priority. While there have been many achievements in 2018, problems exist with the current structure of weather research to operations. The internal and external strategy is fractured, and the computing procurement process is cumbersome, and the funding process disincentivizes collaboration. The FY20 request addresses many of these challenges through the creation of the Earth Prediction Innovation Center, or EPIC. Based on the Weather Research and Forecast Innovation Act of 2017 and the recently authorized National Integrated Drought Information System Reauthorization Act of 2018, EPIC will serve as the hub for building and maintaining a true community model. EPIC's innovative structure will link scientists and software engineers in academia, private industry, and partner agencies with research, development, and operational activities inside of NOAA. EPIC will significantly enhance our ability to access external expertise, reestablishing preeminence of U.S. forecast model skill, and improving our ability to provide accurate watches and warnings. The NOAA Satellite Observing System Architecture Study, or NSOSA, which was completed in 2017, analyzed various approaches to better meet mission requirements with greater flexibility and responsiveness in incorporating evolving technologies. Congress recognized the importance of NSOSA, codifying the program in the NIDIS Reauthorization Act of 2018. This budget initiates NSOSA implementation and invests to evaluate innovative space-based solutions and partnerships, including $12.3 million for joint venture partnerships and hosted payloads on geostationary and polar orbits. It also continues the importance of commercial weather data pilot program, as well as $5 million for the option to purchase data after successful testing. This budget makes necessary investments for strong coastal communities and economies. It includes an increase of $2.3 million for regional fishery management councils to analyze and remove outdated or ineffective regulations. To help level the playing field for U.S. commercial fishermen in the global seafood marketplace, an additional $1.6 million is requested to enforce seafood import monitoring program and prevent the importation of seafood caught using illegal fishing practices. Finally, the budget includes an increase of $3.6 million to support aquaculture by assisting industry with regulatory compliance and conducting research to ensure the American farmed fish are safe and sustainable. Executive Order 13840 established a national ocean policy focused on providing tools to coastal communities to sustainably manage their offshore waters. The budget includes an additional $4 million of ocean data platforms, building on innovative tools developed by NOAA to improve siting and offshore activities. NOAA has made great strides in the past 2 years to reduce the amount of time needed for environmental review. The time to complete formal and informal Endangered Species Act consultations was reduced by over 22% and 65% respectively. Incidental harassment authorizations under the Marine Mammal Protection Act have been reduced by 25%. The FY20 budget builds on this success by providing an additional $3 million to further reduce the timeline of consultations and permits. Other sectors in the blue economy that this budget addresses include marine transportation through additional precision navigation data, efforts to reduce marine debris, accelerate economic benefit and new expanded marine sanctuaries, and reducing the backlog of natural resource damage assessment cases. Finally, this budget includes $5 million for the National Oceanographic Partnership Program. We intend to use these funds to leverage investments from other federal agencies, private industry, and philanthropic organizations that have shared interest in advancing ocean research. These funds can be used for a variety of partnerships ranging from ocean exploration to new technology to detect and protect marine mammals. NOAA services touch every American every day. I believe this budget request meets NOAA's core mission by protecting lives and property while also positioning the agency to be more efficient and effective moving forward. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today. I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony, sir. Dr. Jacobs, and I say this with all due respect, I'm having a hard time taking this budget proposal seriously. It includes an 18% top-line cut along with wholesale elimination of nearly all of the grant programs. It proposes terminating 547 NOAA employees and upending the lives of so many students and postdocs whose funding would be pulled from Sea Grant, the cooperative institutes, and the other external research funding. Do you know how many students exactly would lose the funding they depend on to continue their studies? Is it dozens, hundreds, thousands maybe?
I don't know the exact number of students that would be impacted.
Does anybody know at NOAA that could tell us at a sooner rather than later date?
I'll look into that and see if I can find a number.
So this budget would, in my opinion, halt the early careers of possibly thousands of young scientists. Has NOAA ever discussed that ramification with the department and OMB?
We have, but in a situation where we had to make some tough choices in balancing administration priorities, we really focused on our core mission of protecting life and property.
But let me go back a second to my initial question. You say you don't know how many people it would affect. In the discussions with OMB, didn't it come up the possibility that Congress would ask you how many people it would affect? We tend to do that a lot.
Well, as far as the impact to our ability to maintain our core mission, we still have what we need to do that. As far as the outreach into the educational aspect of it, I don't have that number.
Continue with education. I'm extremely disappointed to once again see severe cuts to NOAA's Office of Education. In particular, the budget proposes to eliminate a program I helped to create over 20 years ago, the Educational Partnership Program with minority serving institutions. Do you know what some of the accomplishments of this program are? For example, that the partner institutions have produced over 2,300 degrees in the NOAA sciences since 2002.
Oh, it's a very valuable program. I would point out that we are $1 million above the previous year's president's budget in this program. As far as STEM goes, there's actually quite a few aspects of this throughout NOAA. We have K through 12 programs at the forecast offices. We have a lot of different outreach that we still do. In fact, moving the community model development program outside of NOAA and putting a lot of our data on external web portals gives the universities and students and PIs and postdocs access to a tremendous amount of information. So my hope is that a lot of this data, while we may not explicitly be funding their research, we'll be giving them access to more information and data to do research.
Well, one of the things that troubles me with this whole presentation is that NOAA doesn't seem to know just how successful they've been. I mean, that the cuts are coming in without fully understanding that these programs mean a lot to a lot of people and produce for the future of our country. Are you also aware that over 50% of our nation's black PhD graduates in the marine and atmospheric sciences benefited from these programs? You do.
Again, it's in the budget situation we're in, we had to make tough choices and focus on our core mission.
What's the budget situation you're in? Is it, I mean, because we've been around here long enough to also know that there's another way of presenting budgets, and that is you leave holes that are easy for anybody to see, and then Congress will take care of it. Is this what's happening here, that you're all hoping that Congress will fill in these holes with in negotiations with the Senate, the House and the Senate?
Well, we made a conscious decision to focus on our core mission of maintaining full-time employees and protecting life and property.
Let me just ask you one more question. This budget proposes to cut an additional 248 employees from the National Weather Service, despite regular reports, including one from GAO, of understaffing and subsequent negative impacts on the quality of forecast produced. How many hours have weather forecasters worked without pay, covering vacant operational shifts because they have hit the overtime premium pay cap imposed by law? What efforts, if any, has the Weather Service taken to avoid requiring its forecasters to work shifts for which they will not be paid?
As far as I know, we're doing a tremendous amount of work in actually backfilling and hiring new forecasters. It's this in FY 2018, it was the first time since 2011 that our actual hiring had outpaced attrition. And granted, we had a setback during the shutdown because of typical retirements happening at the end of the year. We're staffed at roughly 91.5% right now. And once we actually get to the point where we're fully staffed, we won't have to have people, working overtime unless they want to.
Satterholm.
National Water Center. It plays a key role, as you know, in strengthening our nation's water forecast capabilities for floods and droughts and improving preparedness for water-related disasters. My question to you, Dr. Jacobs, will be, can you speak to the importance of the work that's being done at the National Water Center, especially, I'd be interested in speaking, if you could speak in light of the recent flooding events in Nebraska and the fact that NOAA's spring outlook indicated that 2/3 of the lower 48 states face an elevated risk of flooding through May.
The work being done in the National Water Center is extremely critical. It's a little known fact that water actually is responsible for the most deaths, over 100 a year, and about half of those are in cars. It's a critical component of our integrated modeling system, where we're working on forecasting precipitation and then integrating that with the National Water Model, which forecasts stream flow with the help of USGS gauges. The downstream effects of this are not just related to the protection of life and property, although that's the primary concern. It's actually hugely important to the economy, because the Mississippi River is a huge port, and the water flow, particularly now with the amount of volume going through there, is slowing down the shipping. So there's a tremendous amount of value that the Water Center provides, and it's an integral part of what we're doing. I would like to add that in FY19 we'll be including Hawaii in the scope of the National Water Center's coverage, and in FY20 we'll be including Puerto Rico.
As you know, the committee provided funds to expedite hiring within the Water Prediction Operation Division of the National Water Center. Is NOAA committed to maintaining those staffing levels for FY 2020?
Absolutely. So right now we have 68 staff at the Water Center. Our goal is to increase this staff by 25% by the end of FY19. Would
additional resources and staff help improve the center's work that they do there? Is that? We have the resources. We have $1.5 million provided by Congress. It's largely a timing and hiring issue, but we're on pace to hit the 25%. Okay. As you're aware, the Southeast experiences some of the most destructive and deadly tornadoes in the country. Just earlier this month, I pointed out yesterday in a hearing that 23 people lost their lives when an EF4 tornado tore through East Alabama. And that's why my constituents and so many in Alabama and even other parts of the Southeast really value the research programs like the Vortex Southeast. It brings federal agencies together to help better understand how environmental factors in the region affect tornado formation, intensity, and paths. Yesterday, Dr. Cordova was here with the NSF, and I spoke with her about the role in and her commitment to Vortex Southeast as well. Can you take a moment to explain the role that NOAA plays in the Vortex Southeast?
So the research in the ability to both observe and detect and predict tornadoes is right on the cutting edge of what we're doing. Typically, I would refer to a tornado or a convective cell as subgrid scale into forecasting. And while we can observe tornadoes with radar, what we really want to do is understand the dynamics in thunderstorms and be able to try to predict them. And we're just now at the cutting edge of being able to predict rotation in thunderstorm cells. We can't actually predict tornadoes yet, but we can predict tornadic potential. So the outcome of this Project Vortex, as well as what we're going to be doing with the EPIC, we'll be looking at convective resolving models, convective ensembles, and probabilistic forecasting. And eventually, my hope is to get to a point where we can improve what we call our warn-on forecast capability, and that's actually issuing tornado warnings based on forecasted rotation in cells instead of actually waiting to observe the rotation on radar imagery.
Well, given that NOAA has put such high priority on improving weather forecast models to save lives and protect property, what was the rationale in terminating this program?
So a lot of the research that's being done in that program, particularly when it comes to convective allowing models, is going to be done on the academic community side through the Earth Prediction Innovation Center. So while we're streamlining our unified forecasting system, so there's been a lot of talk about the FE3 and the global model, but we're also going to an FE3-based convective allowing model, which will be the next generation of our high-resolution convective forecast, which will obviously be the key model in predicting tornadic potential.
So this research would be carried out in a different area of NOAA?
There'll be several different parts, both in the Weather Service, U.S. Weather Research Program, as well as other parts of OAR that will be doing convective research as well as tornadic research.
You mentioned about the fact that you cannot really predict when a tornado will occur. What do you think it will take for us to develop a real accurate, advanced tornado warning system?
Really, it'll be probably parallel paths working on the convective allowing models and probabilistic forecast, as well as looking into social sciences and the human response to tornado warnings and how they're issued. Originally, we thought that more lead time would provide better response, but how that's messaged is really a social science issue. So we're really looking at this from a social science angle to get the public to better respond to our warnings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Cartwright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Dr. Jacobs, for coming back. We had you not too long ago. As you might recall from our last hearing, I am very interested in what NOAA is doing to address climate change. Significantly, I'm interested in preventing damage to the American economy and also, obviously, improving the science. As stated in the 4th National Climate Assessment, which NOAA helped produce, the impacts of climate change are already being felt in communities across the country. The increasing frequency and intensity of weather-related disasters, some of which Mr. Adderholt just referred to in the Southeast, It's having a real economic impact, not to mention lives lost. Between 2005 and 2018 alone, total federal funding for disaster assistance in the United States has approached $500 billion. $500 billion in 13 years. Just last month, we heard from you that NOAA provides vital real-time weather and climate data to help communities prepare for severe weather events. We also learned there are key scientific questions that NOAA has to continue working on to improve the accuracy and reliability of its short and long-term weather forecasts and climate models. Now, this proposed 18% cut to NOAA's budget decreases funding for weather research and modeling, surface, ocean and upper air observations, and regional climate labs. It also eliminates competitive climate research funds and the Arctic Research Program. These are cuts that make it harder to improve forecasts for floods, hurricanes, wildfires, let alone trying to figure out how to predict tornadoes. I have some questions. In our last hearing, you confirmed that the National Climate Assessment is based on facts and sound science. Is that still your position?
It's the National Climate Assessment basically took the RCP scenarios and extrapolated those to generate potential weather and climate forecast impacts, and the results based on those scenarios are grounded in science.
So just so we're on the same page, this means you agree with the NCA finding that human activities, especially emissions of greenhouse gases from fossil fuel combustion, deforestation, and land use change, are primarily responsible for the climate changes observed over the last 6 decades, correct?
Well, in absence of any other natural forcing, human production of CO2 as well as the removal of the CO2 sinks is certainly a dominant factor.
You agree with the NCA finding that we're already seeing the impacts of climate change and that in the future we will likely experience increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather events?
Well, so the impacts of climate change that we've been seeing now, like as far as sea level rise and such, are fairly well documented. The scenarios of what the actual future weather impacts would be are still being debated. There's some frequency. There's
well, let me
some
stop you there. You signed off on the National Climate Assessment, and that's in there.
Well,
right?
Those are predictions based on predictions. If you believe the assumptions on the first set of predictions, then yes, the discussion as far as
I don't mean to interrupt you, but we have limited time. You believe it, and that's why you signed off on it, right, Dr. Jacobs?
Well, those are peer-reviewed papers, but
Good.
you know, we would have to wait 100 years to see if they verify.
Of course. Do you also agree with the NCA finding that without substantial and sustained reductions in global greenhouse gas emissions, the continued warming is expected to cause substantial net damage to the United States economy throughout this century?
Well, there's also discussion of improved agricultural capabilities as well.
It's a yes or no question, and then you can explain. Do you agree with that? It's in the NCA finding that you signed off on.
The NCA, I don't disagree with anything in the NCA.
Okay. And you can explain. I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh, well, there could be positive potential impacts as well, and some of these are natural and some of them are human-induced. It doesn't change the fact that we should be prepared to deal with them. Exactly.
Mr. Jacobs, have you communicated your views on the soundness of the NCA to the White House, who believe that climate change is a hoax?
I've had numerous discussions with Dr. Drobermeyer, who is the advisor to the White House on all things related to science.
Well, do you think it's responsible leadership on the part of the administration knowingly to ignore the advice of its foremost scientists like you, Dr. Jacobs, on an issue that will cause significant harm to the United States economy and loss of lives?
I don't have any evidence that they're ignoring what they're being told.
Thank you, Doctor. I yield back.
Thank you. I understand. I think all we have at this point is your budget in brief. I don't think we have your congressional justifications of your budget yet. Is that correct?
I don't believe so.
Okay, and is there any reason for a delay in getting that to us?
I suspect part of it is related to the shutdown and just delaying our ability to get it out.
Any expectation about when we can get a more detailed explanation of your budget?
We can certainly get you one. I can get you one as soon as I can. I'm hoping later this week, but not completely sure on that.
Okay. First of all, I just want to associate myself fully with my chair's remarks. I just find it unbelievable, the cuts that were suggested in NOAA. And this comes from somebody that has believed in NOAA for a long, long time. I think many of us do. I think we believe in your mission. I think we believe it's critical, not just to the safety of folks and property around the world, but in a whole range of issues, really critical to our overall mission, scientific advancement, certainly our atmospheres as they are entering a critical phase, and our oceans that are entering a critical phase. So I don't get the reductions, and I don't get where those came from. I cannot believe that anybody in NOAA that believes in the mission of NOAA supports these cuts. And so I have to assume that somebody somewhere told you, hey, cut it. So is it correct that this was a top-down directive to reduce by that much in NOAA, or was this some bottom-up judgment about priorities within NOAA?
Our primary mission was just to focus on dealing with some tough choices, and we really chose to prioritize our core mission and essential functions over a lot of the external grants.
Okay. Well, let me give you an example in your budget as I understand it. I was born and raised in Hilo, Hawaii. Hilo, Hawaii has had two devastating tsunamis in recent history, 1946 and 1960. I actually was there in 1960. I was a young boy. Our family routinely evacuated every time there was an earthquake anywhere in the Pacific Rim. There was an earthquake in the danger zone. We didn't know if a tsunami was coming or not. We got out. And we would do that about once a year. We lived down by the ocean. We were in the danger zone. My school was in the danger zone. One day in 1960, the siren came on. We evacuated. We went to high ground. I went to sleep. I woke up. My town was devastated. There were 61 dead. And that was true throughout the Pacific Rim. There was incredible damage in Chile. Japan, loss of life, California, loss of life throughout the Pacific Rim from a tsunami that was generated. And that was really the genesis for the tsunami warning systems that are so perfected today. The problem of why people died in Hilo in 1960 was that they didn't believe a tsunami was coming. They had no independent verification. They had an evacuation warning once a year, and they got into the lull of thinking, well, it's not going to happen this time around. And so when I see that you have proposed in this budget to cut the Pacific Warning Center, which seems to, which may be a small amount in the big picture, but it's really, really critical to assure people of when a tsunami is and isn't coming, which still happens once a year. We have an earthquake somewhere in the Pacific Rim. I don't get it. I don't, that's a budget cutter up above you somewhere saying, well, let's just cut that. We don't understand the importance. And I'm sitting here telling you I lived through it. And that's very, very important to people. So can you elucidate a little bit on that one subject, why the tsunami warning function in the Pacific is being cut?
So the function itself is not. We were looking at consolidating the warning centers. Right now we have two. We were looking at consolidating it to one. The actual DART array, as well as we're actually exploring some other potential capabilities. So I'll get into those in a second. But the DART array is fully funded. That's not going to decrease. It's the consolidation of the warning centers. There's actually the potential for us. We have a plus of $2.2 million for commercial data buys off ships, and there's some new interesting tsunami detection capability on several commercial ships. And now that they're installing SATCOM on these ships, there might be a way that we can actually enhance our tsunami detection capability through this data.
Will your scientists come before Congress and tell us that this replacement array, facility, capability that you suggest is going to be equally safe or safer from a tsunami prediction perspective than what we have now? Or is this simply about cutting budgets?
It won't be less safe. We haven't seen the data yet, so until we actually see the data and run the tests, it's going to be hard to quantify how much of an improvement it'll add.
Okay, well, I would suggest to you that that's putting the cart before the horse, because you're proposing to cut out that whole warning center before you've demonstrated and said with assurance that it's going to be safer. So I don't know why you're sitting here cutting it right now when you don't have the conclusions yet. But anyway, we can move on. I'm going to move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Administrator Jacobs. Thanks for coming back. This is going to seem a lot like deja vu, same questions, same issues, parochial to not just my state, but to the Gulf of Mexico states and probably the United States. I'd like to jump in and discuss marine aquaculture. As you know, marine aquaculture produces healthy, sustainable, and affordable seafood, yet the United States ranks 16th in the world in terms of aquaculture production. We owe it to our citizens to do better, which is why I'm reintroducing the Bipartisan Aqua Act this year to provide a clear path for permitting aquaculture in U.S. waters. Given that reducing the seafood deficit is one of NOAA's top priorities, why does this budget proposal zero out sea grant programs, which provides important aquaculture research that drives economic development?
When it comes to sea grants, we had to make some tough budget decisions and some choices and really decided to focus on our core capability and mission. I would like to add that there is an additional $13 million directed at aquaculture. The funding would enhance coordination with aquaculture siting, research, permitting agencies to simplify the process and streamline it in federal waters.
What can we in Congress do to help with that permitting process? And in fact, that's what the Aqua Act is designed to do, and I know my Senate colleagues are trying to perfect it right now, as well as my House colleagues, and we're working very closely with your team. So what can we do?
I think what you're doing with the Aqua Act is perfectly in line with what we have in mind for aquaculture.
Why is aquaculture one of NOAA's top priorities? Why should we be invested in aquaculture?
Well, there's roughly $16 billion seafood trade deficit, and that's one of the things that we're trying to mitigate. Right now, almost all of the farmed fish is imports, and there's really no reason why we shouldn't be doing that in our own waters.
All right, I know my colleague, Congressman DeLauro, would agree with you that we need to rely more on our domestic fisheries than foreign imports. So again, the aqua bill is very much a bipartisan bill, and I hope to be sharing that with everyone on this committee in the near future. Okay, moving on, let's talk about hypoxia and hypoxia zones. When you were here last month, we discussed the importance of hypoxia research and stopping the growth of harmful algae blooms. This year, we are forecasting unusually high flooding levels across the country. 32 states, again, drain into the Mississippi River Basin, 2 Canadian provinces, and much of the nutrients in fresh water that cause hypoxia make their way into the Gulf of Mexico. More flooding means a growing dead zone in the Gulf. And right now we have some record flooding happening all across the Mississippi River Basin. And I know the EPA spearheads the Mississippi River, the Gulf of Mexico Hypoxia Task Force, but how does NOAA also help stop the growth of hypoxia, and anything you'd like to add to what NOAA is doing to help us understand it and hopefully research it and shrink it or prevent it from further growing?
So actually preventing the events is beyond the scope of our mission, but what we can do is we can help predict them. So this is where we really need to focus on not just integrating our precipitation forecast models with the National Water Model at the National Water Center, but also integrate the runoff that the National Water Model produces through areas that would be prone to take nutrients into waters that would trigger harmful algae blooms. It's typically when these algae bloom that they trigger a hypoxia event. So this is all sort of traced back to largely inland water flow exiting in through the estuaries out into the ocean. So improving and integrating the modeling system, not just on the National Water Model side, but also on the harmful algae bloom side, having the coupled hydrological, ecological, biological models is going to be critical in this.
And I guess last October we were talking to our Rear Admiral Sela testified before the Senate committee about the NOAA fleet recapitalization, and I believe he stated that we're decommissioning more ships than we're commissioning. Can you tell us about your plans on the recapitalization of the NOAA research and survey ships?
So at the end of FY19, we had a deferred maintenance backlog of roughly 12.6 million in ORF and 11.4 in PAC. One of the things that we are looking at is the e-algae. There's 3 million invested in that, but it's not for actual repairs. It's actually to determine the critical missions that it does. You know, how can we offload those onto other vessels, whether we contract or charter or actually try to divide up the current hours that we use across our other fleet.
I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Jacobs, for being here today. Taking a look at this budget request, it appears that you'll be cutting as much as 75% of the total funding NOAA provides for addressing harmful algae blooms. And as I'm sure you can agree, algae bloom events have significant negative impacts on the communities that are affected by them. Following the devastating red tide bloom off the coast of Florida this past year, the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council performed a business damage assessment survey to gain a broad understanding of the economic impact of the algae bloom. That survey estimated that the total physical and economic damages between August and December of last year for the 12 most impacted counties in Florida was just over $130 million. So 12 counties out of our 67, 5 months time period, $130 million lost, which is a significant number. And unfortunately, the funding levels to support algae bloom research, monitoring, and response are already disproportionately low compared to the economic impact. So I was very disappointed to see that this budget request proposes to cut them even further. Considering the significant economic impact of harmful algae bloom events, how can you justify cutting that part of the budget in particular even more?
So again, this is a tough budget decision. We made a conscious decision to retain. So out of that, it was a cut of roughly 23.7 million. We're retaining 8.8 million for key personnel, particularly related to the forecasting of harmful algae blooms, hypoxia, pathogen research, and forecasting for habitat and species, and the science related to that. So the actual forecast tools will remain. So the HABs prediction and hypoxia predictions will continue, but a lot of the research will be cut.
I think I heard you say that the cut is 23 million?
Well, we actually do harmful algae bloom research in a lot of different areas, but we're retaining.
That's not what I asked you. I thought you just said, you cited a couple numbers.
So for the NCOS program, it's minus 23.7, but we're retaining 8.8. There will be potentially 94 positions that, you know, we'll look at early retirement and such.
Well, you know, I studied a little math in school. So we're cutting 23 and we're keeping 8. So does that mean before it was 31 million total? And being reduced to 8?
Well, we're going to retain 8.8 for this program, but there's actually the work that we do for harmful algae blooms is not, there's a lot of different work that we do in different areas.
What is the total that you allocate for algae bloom research and affecting it?
I don't have the exact number for the total. It would, I mean, it would extend, some could argue, all the way back to our forecast models because of the water runoff at the National Water Center being a key component of this.
Let me ask it another way. Do you think that this budget request to us with these reductions of approximately 75% is appropriate in order for you to continue to meet your mission and help us avoid these kind of problems going forward and be able to research and learn from them?
Well, it'll obviously, you know, slow some of the research, but we'll be able to maintain our core forecast capabilities certainly at their current standards.
So what did you do with the $23 million if you could do it without it?
Well, that was dedicated at looking at how we could improve future capabilities.
Well, that would be a pretty important mission, would it not? It is to Florida, and I'm sure Mississippi and other places that are affected by it, Alabama.
It's definitely important, but you know, we had to make some tough decisions and chose to just retain the core essential functions.
This is not a part of your core essential function.
Oh, providing the harmful algae bloom forecasts, that's part of our core essential function.
Which part is not? The research.
The external grants and research that would help us further improve our mission in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Jacobs, the administration is proposing the elimination of the National Centers for Coastal Ocean. NOAA. Let's discuss this proposal. First, your budget says that you will continue some of the highest priority work, but you fail to provide any information about how you will implement this plan. Can you shed some light on it?
I believe you're talking about the end cost, the minus 23.7. So again, we are retaining 8.8 million of that to maintain our core functions and the tools that we provide to the public for not just the harmful algae bloom and hypoxia that we were just discussing, but pathogen research and prevention. But the additional research that's being done is not part of that retention of core capability.
You still didn't tell us exactly how you're going to implement the plan, though.
Well, implement the 8.8 will not be implementing anything new. It'll just be retaining the core capabilities that we already do.
You know, I having a difficulty with this hearing because a lot of these things that are coming up look like they were not thought through completely. And as my colleague, Mr. Case, said, there's got to be people at NOAA who take this seriously. I mean, and I know you do, and it's clear to me that this did not come from you folks. You might have been told, here it is, and maybe you can comment on it, but this sounds like a policy that comes from some other place. But we will have to deal with that as time goes on. The budget also cuts a program in the Arctic that models and predicts sea ice. Given that Russia is rapidly expanding its activities in the Arctic, our knowledge and understanding of sea ice is critical to our national security. How do you reconcile the elimination of NOAA with the administration's broader national security efforts?
So a lot of the research that we do as it pertains to climate in the Arctic is being cut, but I would like to add that we are doing some enhanced work and development on forecasting and analyzing sea ice and sea ice flow as it pertains to both our dynamical weather model and our general circulation climate models. And this is something that we're working very closely with the Navy on.
You're working with the Navy, and you feel that then this will make up for any deficiency that I might have pointed out?
It's yet to be determined if it would make up for the deficiencies. I think that the scope of it is a little bit different. It's more how do we manage dealing with the sea ice and the analysis in the next couple of years versus very long range.
NOAA has been performing the work of evaluating the impacts of rising sea levels on our coastal military installations, as Congress has repeatedly directed in the National Defense Authorization Act. Can you explain the seeming contradiction between the Department's claims of prioritizing national security and the elimination of a program which is critical to it?
We actually are doing a tremendous amount of work in research and getting our data out there through various ocean data portals. Two of the things that I'd like to point out, well, one of them, the marinecadastre.gov website, this is where you can actually access a lot of the sea level rise data. This is made available to the public. We're increasing this by $4 million to try to get the data out to the public. You know, this is something that I think would be very useful, not just for our stakeholders, but possibly any other, whether it's private sector, other government agency doing planning when it comes to future mitigation of sea level rise.
Committee members will note that I'm keeping to the 5-minute rules. Ms. Adderhold?
Let me go back to tornadoes. I want to take a moment to discuss the FY 2020 request for the National Mesonet Program. Despite the fact that the National Mesonet Program is a key component of NOAA's efforts to develop a weather-ready nation, the 2020 budget request proposes to reduce the geographic scope of the program from all 50 states to prioritize states most susceptible to tornadoes and severe weather. How important, in your opinion, is the Mesonet program improving weather predictions around the country?
The Mesonet program is very important because it's one of our only conduits to access data outside of the data that we actually collect ourselves. But it's beyond the typical Mesonet, which you would think is surface observations. There's other observing systems in there, such as atmospheric profilers and commercial aircraft data. The vertical profiles that we obtain through the Mesonet program are extremely critical. The surface obs, you could divide the surface obs in criticality based two ways. One would be the quality of the instrumentation, and the other one being the geographical location. So there's certain areas where the surface obs in the Mesonet would provide more impact in the model skill than the other.
Well, I appreciate that the program was protected in the request, but how would scaling back the program impact areas of the country, especially rural areas, which rely on the program to define rapidly deteriorating weather conditions that are not identified by other observation platforms?
Well, that's going to be tough to fill in those gaps. A lot of these mesonets tend to be coincident with agriculture, so you tend to see a lot of the mesonets in rural areas versus urban areas, which is actually a good thing because, as you say, there's not a lot of deployment of other systems out there. One of the only other ways that we can offset this is just through the better assimilation of satellite data, because in these rural areas where we don't have a lot of data, it's really hard to get information in the boundary layer. One of the things that the Mesonet program does do is regional airlines, which is a little bit different than the data we collect from the wide-body long-haul flights, and the regional airlines fly into these smaller regional airports, and the vertical profiles that they provide are extremely critical.
The 2019 conference report included guidance for NOAA to continue to expand the Mesonet program. How does NOAA plan to implement this direction in the upcoming year, and how will expanding the program improve weather forecast and warning?
Well, the National Mesonet program, I would argue the term national could possibly be a misnomer. It would be an interesting way to actually acquire non-NOAA related data that go well beyond the nation's borders. For example, information from, commercial aircraft data profilers or other mesonets possibly in areas outside of our country. When we really, over the next couple of years, start to focus on high-resolution global modeling systems, the most valuable information might not actually be collected within our borders. It'll most likely be collected to our west, whether it's over the Pacific Ocean or countries that we work with through the WMO and data sharing agreements. It's entirely possible that we'll find ourselves in a situation where we would be doing commercial data buys for data, in situ data that's from observing systems overseas. And I can envision a national mesonet program possibly being one of those ways of doing that.
Let me switch briefly to improving our ability regarding the Earth Prediction Innovation Center. I think improving our ability to predict the Earth systems, including weather, climate, and extreme events, has the potential to add enormous value to our economy, advance national security, and protect the safety of our communities. How will the Earth Prediction Innovation Center advance its capabilities?
So there's two primary hurdles that the EPIC tries to address. The first one is we really need access to expertise outside of NOAA, and these visiting scientists don't have security clearances to log into our machines. And it takes them, if they apply, it takes them well over a year to get it. So the only way I could think of to solve this problem is to move our software development to compute resources external to NOAA. The other thing is, per the Weather Research Innovation Act, we're required to develop a community model, and that doesn't necessarily just mean make the code community available. It means make the code accessible by the community on compute resources that the community has access to. So EPIC will sort of be the virtual hub where we manage the code development in commercial cloud vendors' hardware. So this will be the compute that the community has access to, and we make the code available and manage it through EPIC. So we're essentially crowdsourcing model development with the academic community and private industry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Jacobs, in the oversight hearing last month, you and Dr. Freilich identified several gaps in our Earth observing capabilities, saying that obviously it would be useful to have more data on things like aerosols, vertical wind, and soil moisture, better to predict weather, manage our resources, and understand climate change. Why does the administration want to cut funding for research in these areas when it's clear more resources would make sense?
Well, some of the low-hanging fruit that we're looking for in analyzing the satellite data, which is what we were discussing at that last hearing, is actually extracting more value from the data. So right now, with the existing capability that we have, we do not use roughly 80% of the data that we bring in, just because the file sizes are too large. So we only use about 10% of the data that we collect as far as prediction capabilities, and only about 2% actually influences the initial conditions in the models. So for a small amount of investment on the satellite data assimilation side, if we can move that number from 2 or 3% to 5 or 6%, we could potentially have huge gains in forecast model skill just using the current data that we have access to.
Well, I know you're trying to invest your limited resources wisely, but it has to be obvious that you can't possibly make up for the slashing of all of the following programs, and this is a mouthful, so bear with me. And it's not a complete list of the programs this budget proposes to reduce or eliminate. The Vortex Southeast, taking out $5 million. That's something that improves tornado forecasts in the southeast U.S., including Alabama, which, as we've heard, was hit by about 40 tornadoes in March that killed more people than all of 2018. And according to NOAA's website, the number of killer tornadoes in the southeastern U.S. is disproportionately large when compared to the overall number of tornadoes throughout the country. It cuts out $2.6 million from the airborne phased array radar, which improves detection and understanding of severe weather. It cuts out $60 million from the climate competitive research activities, including NOAA's funding for the National Climate Assessment. It takes out $3 million from the Antarctic Ecosystem Research Program. Antarctic Research takes out $6 million from that to improve operational sea ice modeling and predictions. It slashes $3.7 million from the regional climate centers, which help regions deal with emerging droughts and floods. It takes out $4.8 million from the Air Resources Lab, which researches atmospheric dispersion of mercury and other pollutants harmful to human health. My question is, have you informed the administration that cutting funding for weather and climate research makes it harder for NOAA to improve forecast precision, which is an important element for securing people and property and the American economy?
We've worked hand in hand with them in formulating this budget.
So yes, you've informed them. Thank you for that. So why is the administration ignoring the advice of its expert scientists on the importance of improving forecasts to secure lives and property and protect the American economy?
Well, we had to make some tough budget decisions, and we were forced to essentially look at retaining our core missions for our current state of predictive capabilities.
Right, now there's this ad hoc working group that I want to ask you about. Did the White House ask NOAA for input into the formation of the White House's ad hoc working group to question climate science? And will NOAA's climate science experts be any part of that?
I don't know that there's any ad hoc working group that's been formed.
You're not a part of it if there is.
I've been in discussions with various folks about issues related to climate change. That's primarily the OSTP's director's job, but I don't know of any ad hoc working group that's officially been formed.
Will you commit, Dr. Jacobs, to informing the administration that we know with certainty that humans are contributing to climate change and that NOAA can make available expert scientists to help explain it? And can you report back the results of these conversations?
We make available all of our data. Certainly the administration is aware of the research that we do. I'm happy to report that back, and within the potential scope of NCA 5, that will be the official report.
Last question. Are staff and scientists at NOAA ever discouraged from using terms such as climate change and resilience? And if you've heard of such instances, what would you do about it?
I am vehemently opposed to any type of academic censorship on this front. Transparency and openness is key to what our agency does. Our entire mission is based on providing open and transparent, robust, defendable science.
Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate that. Yield back.
Sorry, I'm still on the overall budget cuts and trying to figure out what the message we are to take from the administration is on the budget cuts. And I understand that you felt you were under, or perhaps I'm putting words in your mouth, but felt you were under directions to do substantial reductions. As I look at kind of where the reductions really fell the worst on, it just seems inescapable that the programs of NOAA that are focused on the oceans, and I don't mean on fisheries management, I mean on the conservation and health and welfare of our oceans overall, were the ones that took the biggest hit. I see the National Ocean Service, if my math is correct, 65% of FY enacted, OAR, Ocean and Atmospheric Research, I don't know the division there, but 55% of prior enacted, whereas really your atmospheric was reduced, and your satellites were, for the most part, maintained. Now, I breathe the same ocean, I breathe the same air as everybody else in Hawaii, and we have the same use for the satellites, all of which is incredible research and contributions by NOAA. But you know, if you look at the map above the chair over there, you'll see that in Hawaii we kind of live in the middle of a big ocean, so we're more focused on the ocean. So was there some judgment within NOAA or somewhere else that somehow oceanic research was you know, not pulling its weight, or too many external grants, or is that a priority judgment I should take from this budget exercise?
As far as the OAR research, we're funding climate at 88 million, oceans at 98, and weather at 110. But I would point out that a lot of the weather research we're doing benefits the climate research, so it's pretty linear across the board. Oceans are, you know, it's part of my life. I mean, surfing and fishing are my two favorite hobbies. One of the things that we are funding,
We have something in common, by the way. So.
I know. I've been to Hawaii multiple times. I love it there.
Thank you.
One of the things I'd like to point out is our national Oceans Partnership Program. So we'll be relying heavily on public-private partnerships with key stakeholders on this to do a lot of the work. You know, whether it's actual research or just outreach. I think that there's a lot of opportunities here, both on the oceanographic prediction side as well as the observing side, not just in the water chemistry, but also bathymetry.
Okay. Can I switch back? I just need to switch. I'm not sure that I understand your answer. One part of your answer could be that we are going to essentially privatize a lot of the functions of NOAA and, as you say, lean on the private sector for that. And I'm not sure that that is the right policy decision. But anyway, we can have that discussion further. Can I switch back to the NOAA fleet and talk to you about the NOAA fleet? Because your recapitalization program, which I fully agree with, called for replacement of NOAA ships over time, but assumed that the Hi'ialakai, which is the NOAA ship homeported in Hawaii, would be continued in place for some period of time into the future. And as you and I know, the Hi'ialakai is no longer seaworthy. And that came as a sudden surprise to many people. And so therefore, the functions that are carried out of Hawaii are discontinued from that perspective. I think you mentioned, well, two questions. First of all, have you considered revising your recapitalization program to accelerate ship construction and to homeport replacement ship in Hawaii, number one? And then number two, what is your plan in this budget for fulfilling the research needs of the Hawaii-based NOAA activities? I think that if I look at, I don't think you mentioned $3 million in your answer to my colleague, but I'm not sure, is that allocated to Hawaii replacement time, or is it across the board? I see 200,000 in here, but I don't know where the 3 million is in the materials that you gave us.
So the 3 million is directed at trying to offset all of the work that the Ialakai was doing. And so whether we can use that funding to do it on other NOAA ships, or we have to charter other vessels or contract it out, is to be determined based on the specific requirements. There are some type of requirements that are very specific to the type of vessel based on instrumentation and how the vessel's outfitted. So those could be limiting factors. As we go through the revision of this plan, we would certainly love to work with you on this.
I appreciate that. So just to recap what you just said, the 3 million would essentially buy replacement time for Hi'ialakai through the next fiscal year?
That's the plan.
Okay. And what about my question on revising the recapitalization plan to account for the Hi'ialakai's departure?
We would definitely love to work with you on the development of that.
Thank you.
Unless you have something I could submit to the record, so whatever is good for you. If you want to continue on for another question or two, or if you want to conclude, I can submit for record.
Well, let me just ask one question, and then you can finish up.
Okay. All right. I'll finish up with one question then as well.
Mr. Jacobs, Puerto Rico's coral reefs provide nearly $1 billion in economic value to the island annually, supporting the tourism industry and protecting lives and infrastructure from storm surge by acting as a barrier. September 2017, Hurricanes Irma and Maria caused extensive damage to these valuable and slow-growing reefs. Fortunately, NOAA's coral restoration work can help dramatically speed up the recovery. How does the proposed 6% cut to the coral reef program reflect the need to restore Puerto Rico's damaged corals and coordinate with agencies like FEMA to conduct post-storm damage assessments?
So the coral reefs are incredibly important, and after the storm, one of the things that we did, in addition to working with the Marine Corps to install radars and get the basic observing system capabilities up there, was to go and revitalize and do a lot of the marine debris removal of the coral reefs. One of the issues, not just with the damage to the reef, but actually the reef itself was damaged just from debris, as well as enhancing the coral reef. One of the great things about the reefs around Puerto Rico is that they actually are integral part of the dissipating the wave energy. So it's incredibly important to have them in place to essentially protect the land from not just storm surge, but waves.
So these cuts, you think will affect that work in any way?
Well, a lot of this research just on the coral side it's a reduction of 1.6 from the enacted, but it retains 26.1 million to continue on with that research. And so there is the opportunity to focus research on coral restoration as well as disease and such.
Of course, every day NOAA generates tens of terabytes of data from satellites, radar, ships, weather models, other sources. And of course, NOAA makes that available to the public. What is tell us about the Big Data Project, and in what way is it different from what NOAA is already doing with the data?
So the Big Data Project is a great way to work with various cloud vendors in getting our data out to the public. So I know in the past I've discussed limitations with compute resources, but we also have limitation on storage. Storing this data. We have well over 25, probably closer to 30 petabytes of data that the public actually can make use of, not just the research community, but private industry and other government agencies. And so working with various cloud vendors that they can set up a sort of interface where companies can actually download the data and generate value-add products from our data is enhancing obviously their business models, but it also benefits us, because if we're driving industry to co-locate their operations adjacent to where we store our data on these cloud vendors, it's an incentive for them to work with us on negotiating a deal on storage, because we're actually improving their revenue by generating business that wants access to the data that the taxpayers pay and we produce and put on these data portals.
I know, and let me just change the subject on one thing about that, but it reminded me of it. I know growing up, I would listen to the NOAA weather radio reports, and of course, at that time, you didn't have weather available as quickly as we do nowadays with cell phones and apps and different things like that. Of course, y'all still operate the weather radio program that has been in existence for, I'm sure, for decades. What is there, in the day and age of smartphones, is there a way to access that data without a weather radio, or is it, do you have to have a weather radio to access that today?
So the NOAA weather radio is a very unique and important program. It actually saved my life in 1997. I would have been hit by a tornado had I not been listening to it. There are other ways to access that information. We disseminate our warnings and watches over various third-party vendor apps. There's also the capability of low Earth orbiting satellite. Sat phone connectivity can get you access to this information, whether it's Inmarsat or Iridium or another satellite data provider. But some of the key core capabilities would still be part of the weather radio. So we're always looking at ways to try to get our message out there. And with the help of a lot of these various third-party app developers, certainly smartphone devices are one way to do it. But that doesn't mean that it would ever be something that could possibly replace that.
Of course, the information, if you have a weather radio, that is, of course, you have free access to that information. Is there an app that is the public has access to with free of charge?
So we don't develop apps ourselves. One of the things that we made a conscious decision on, because if you look at the National Academy's Fair Weather Report, it basically defines swim lanes of what the Weather Service would do and versus what private industry would do. And private industry has done a tremendous job in developing these apps. Some are free, some are for cost. And we would essentially, if we tried to develop a competitive app, would not only be competing with a product that's probably better than what we could do, we would rather rely on them as a key partner. So as part of the Weather Ready Nation, we have ambassadors, which are essentially private sector, what we call value add industry, that we rely on to disseminate our warnings and watches deeper into the public.
Can you access the information from the weather radio? If you don't have a weather radio, can you access it off the internet?
I don't know that you can access it in the exact same format. The weather radio essentially just reads a lot of these transcribed pieces of information.
So in essence, you have to have a weather radio in order to get the
feed that goes out encoded for the weather radio is specifically designed to be heard over the weather radio.
And there's really no other way you can get that at this point?
At this point, not that I know of. There might be a third-party app that could transcribe it into something on the internet. Technically, it's possible. It would essentially just be doing what the weather radio does, except, voice over IP or something.
So y'all made the conscious decision not to have through the internet or through an app where it would just read off the message that you get on the weather radio.
Well, the text is just the warnings. Those are issued over the internet. They're issued over smartphone devices.
But verbally,
I don't know. You would have to have some software that would actually read the text off a web browser out loud.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
That we're big fans of NOAA here, and I suspect you could do a better job than private industry in putting together an app that could give us information. In fact, I'll probably get a lot of letters on this, or some, but I bet you when they were putting together their apps, they were working off a lot of information that you guys have been gathering for years and NOAA, so don't undersell yourself. Thank you for your testimony today. I'm not making excuses, but if at times the questioning was probing, it's because we are big fans of NOAA here. And we want NOAA to succeed and to continue to succeed. And when we see a budget proposal like this one, it worries us. And I think in this case, we when it comes to spending money, we always have differences on different sides of the aisle. But I can honestly speak for Mr. Adderholt to say that we are fans of NOAA. We want NOAA to do the right job and to be prepared and supported by Congress in doing the right job. So that's why we asked the questions the way we did. Thank you, Mr. Jacobs, and hope to see you again.
Thank you for your support.